Folks, welcome to the Rotoworld football show for Thursday, July 10th. And yes, I had to look at my phone to confirm that as I read it. I wanted to make sure I was correct because Pat, when he introduces the show, he's always right on with the date. Although he then talks about the passage of time and things. I'm not going to do that. We're going to get right into it.
Because he also riffs about definitely knowing what the show is about. He's like, oh, we've got so many great topics. 30-second pause, pulls up Google Doc. Such as 30-second pause again, scrolls Google Doc. So if you didn't know the date, it's fine to catch your breath there.
No, I knew it. Right. I knew it 2 seconds before I said it. Another thing about Pat's intro, for a guy who doesn't wear contacts or glasses, he sure seems to have a hard time seeing during the show, where he leans into the camera like this and has to look at the Google Doc like that. So I'm not gonna do any of that. And I'm going to do that podcast thing where you say, we're going to get right into it. But Kyle, we're not going to get right into it. And by the way, I'm Denny Carter. That's Kyle Dvorchak. And we're going to start just for a few minutes here, if you'll indulge us, talking about the beach. Folks love the beach. And Kyle got a taste of that recently on the July 4th weekend because Kyle, unbeknownst to me until about 5 minutes ago, he lives on the dang beach in North Carolina, which is pretty cool. Tell the folks what it's like to be a beach resident, right? And have people flood in for their little holidays. How fun is that for you?
I was going to say, it's really cool. Honestly, like I don't want to brag, but it's pretty cool for 11 months and 24 days of the year. Yeah. Very cool to live on the beach. I'm very privileged to have a fun job that we do this all remote for the most part. Everyone's going to get to join up in the studio. We're back in my hometown of Canton to do some fun stuff. For the most part, I'm just out and about. I can live wherever I want. And I chose the beach because at some point I won't be able to swim. Like I'll move to the West Coast or something. And apparently all the water's cold on the West Coast year round. I didn't know that. Yeah, they say the water's cold on the West Coast year round. So I want to be able to live on the beach for a few years. And it's awesome. And then it turns out 4th of July, all these yokels come in from places like Maryland, places like not New York City. It's all like upstate New York, Wisconsin, my lovely home state, mostly home state of Ohio. And I'm stepping over them. They're oozing with cheese from the Midwest as I try and get to the water. And as much as it's annoying to have your town flooded to the point where you cannot drive to the gas station, I understand it because it's literally what I did. That's why I moved here, as I was like, you know what? I'm from the Midwest. My poor pasty body has never seen 7 consecutive days of sun. Let's do 365.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. And the folks from Maryland coming into North Carolina, by the way, I'll be vacationing in North Carolina next month. What's bad about the Maryland folks is that they have their pet crabs, right? So everybody has their crabs on little leashes, and they're walking the crabs everywhere because we all have pet crabs. And so I know that is frustrating. Is it something? Do you like hole up in your house on the busy days, Labor Day, 4th of July, stuff like that?
Genuinely, yeah. Like it's completely like I get to go to the beach whenever I want. I went to the beach yesterday on a Wednesday. Because apologies to Rotopat, a scheduling snafu in which I requested off a Wednesday that I just didn't need off on accident. Love you, Rotopat. Come back soon. So I was like, well, I accidentally took off an entire day. Guess I'll just go to the beach. That's awesome. No one's there. Like you just can't even drive there on the 4th of July, Friday or Saturday or whatever it was. So it's like, well, guess I'll just. But you're like, oh, I'll just go to a bar and hang out or go get coffee and hang out. Nope, everyone's there too. How close do you live to a beach? Like I know you live in Maryland, but
right. So that's the thing. I think that there is a misconception of Marylanders as all living on the beach, right?
I would kind of think that, at least a little bit.
The nearest beach to me is 4 hours. Okay,
wait, no, that's a lie.
3.5. I mean, to get to the Atlantic Ocean is 3.5 hours. And so I get it. Maryland's a tiny little state smushed between Virginia and wherever else we are, and then so everybody's got to be close to the coast. That's not true. Like it's a grind to get to the ocean, and even though I'm close to the ocean, I'm 3 hours away, 4 hours away, I still come to your state to visit the ocean in the summer. Speaking of the ocean, we're talking about West Coast-ish teams on today's show, the NFC West and the AFC West. We're going to begin in the AFC West, which we talked about on Tuesday. For fantasy purposes, low key, as my kid says, low key, very interesting. And we're going to begin with the Raiders, who have not one, but two players going in the top 15 in fantasy drafts in Ashton, Jeanty, and Brock Bowers. I wrote up the Raiders as the 2025 preview for the Raiders on Rotoworld. You can check that out along with all our other wonderful, spectacular, never incorrect fantasy previews for every team in the league. So my question to you, Kyle, to kick things off with the Raiders, are we putting too much faith in Geno Smith to support, round one Ashton Jeanty and then round 1/2 Brock Bowers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. And it's because of something we mentioned on the Tuesday Q&A, if you want to go back and check it out, is we can comfortably project in terms of the carry share that, I mean, unless someone wants to be bold enough to say, like, we believe that Pete Carroll really thinks he can do thunder and lightning with number 6 or 5 overall pick, generational adjacent prospect Ashton Jeanty, and the corpse of Raheem Mostert. Like, no, unless you believe that to be true, just take him at his word and say, yeah, they're doing the thunder and lightning thing with Raheem Mostert and Ashton Jeanty. It's pretty fair to pencil him in for one of the highest carry shares for a running back in the NFL, but you can also pencil him in for an elite target share as far as we expect for guys who can project for 250, 300 carries, because he was such a good receiver, not last year, but 2 years ago in college, over 3 yards per route run. That makes him, along with Jahmyr Gibbs and Christian McCaffrey, the only running backs to have a single season of 3+ yards per route run in college and go in the first round. I don't think he's quite on the same tier as those guys as pass catchers, but like, he had a season in which he was. I do think that if he came out to be maybe Jahmyr Gibbs, because I do think Christian McCaffrey is the best pass catching back ever, essentially. Like, you throw him up there with like
probably
Falk or whatever. Yeah. Like, he's one of the 2 or 3 best. I don't think he'll get there, but I frankly do think he get Jahmyr Gibbs levels of explosive pass catching threat. So I'm penciling him in for a strong RB1 role. It's a pretty good year for the RB1. So if you want to take him, like, he goes pick 10 or 11. If you think he's more of that 12, 13, 14 range, you like the receivers there more, I won't push back against that. But where he ranks within the running backs, I think it's perfectly fine. You can pretty much say the same thing about Brock Bowers in his command of the targets. If you just looked at him position agnostic and stacked him up against guys like Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors, he would profile extremely similar to
crazy.
Those guys.
It's like, we have to remind folks, he's a tight end. He's tight end eligible in your fantasy league.
Like, he beat out Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd McConkey in targets per route run. He was like 1/10 or 2/10 of a yard per route run behind Malik Neighbors. He was up there in terms of PFF receiving grade with those guys. There's just nothing about this player, given what he was in college and what he did in his first year, that isn't to say he can't be a great tight end, that he can just be a great wide receiver that we give tight end eligibility to. Like, if you want to make the argument that Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas are more likely to hit like some crazy total in their career, 1,800 yards in a single season, I get that. That's where I'll draw the line at, like, position eligibility and how a player is deployed to that specific degree maybe matters. You don't need that kind of season out of him. Do I think he's pretty close to as likely to getting 1,400 yards as those guys? Yeah. I do think it's not that different of a measurement of like, these guys are all that good. They could get 1,400 yards. And I don't think you should rule Brock Bowers out from being as good as those guys at like the 75th, the 80th percentile, maybe pushing out to that like 1,800 yard Justin Jefferson stuff he can't do. You just don't need him to do that to absolutely kill your opponents at tight end. So these 2 bets are ones that I just feel uber confident in making.
This is all contingent on a fully healthy season for Geno Smith, because if Geno goes down this year, 35 years old, entering the season, it's Aiden O'Connell's season again, and it's over for everybody. Aiden O'Connell, one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I'm not talking about starter back, any qualification, any measure, he's terrible. So we know that Geno can make this thing run, and the reason we know this is because last year, 2024, a down season for Geno Smith, still was pretty good in the metrics. So even in a terrible year in Seattle, Geno had an on-target rate of 74%. Only Burrow, Tua, and Baker Mayfield were better. He was 3rd in catchable ball rates. And get this, Kyle, and I included this in my Raiders preview, really ran ice cold. Geno Smith ran ice cold in the red zone last year. He completed only 7 of 27 pass attempts inside the 10-yard line last season. Now, all 7 went for touchdowns somehow. I don't really know how that happened, but 7 for 27 is just it's unbelievable. You would think that he could complete more than that, blindfolded. So I think some regression, some positive regression in that area. The presence of Bowers, Jacoby Myers, who we talked about on Tuesday quite a bit on the Q&A. If folks want to check that out on the NFL and NBC YouTube channel. I'm confident. I like Bowers at ADP. I think he can blow the roof off. You just talk about Bowers' upside for a minute. You were talking about his yardage upside. Well, I think the more likely scenario for unlocking that upside would be more touchdowns. So last year, Deontay Johnson saw more inside the 10 targets than Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers saw 8 inside the 10 targets. Give him 15, 16, 17 looks inside the 10. And he's by far and away tight end 1 overall. And he's going to, like you said, maybe compete with some elite receivers as far as total fantasy points. So I don't mind taking him there because of Geno, but it all does hinge on Geno.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think Geno's a special quarterback by any means, but that's not the bar that was set last year, given what Brock Bowers did. It's don't be Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and Desmond Ridder, who is getting dropbacks for this team. He's clearly better than those guys. And weirdly, the Brock Bowers ADP is falling. I think there's 2 very obvious culprits. Christian McCaffrey, over the past month, maybe more than a month now, has jumped him, and as has Devon Achane off the back of the Geno Smith trade. So maybe it's just those 2 players. Maybe this fall isn't something that will sustain. But right now, he's going ADP 19.1. I was relatively comfortable taking him at the 2-3 turn. There were still receivers there that sometimes I'm taking BTJ over him. Neighbors, when he goes to the 1-2 turn, you can take him over Brock Bowers, but that's not even a choice you have to make anymore. Now you get to make that choice with the next tier of wide receivers, with the next tier of running backs. Like at 19.1, he's probably going to be one of my highest drafted players in the first 2 rounds. So.
It's good to know. Listen, I didn't listen to Pat Kerrane last year when he was begging us to take Bowers and to stop talking about Bowers like some sort of bust. I actually believe we said, get Bowers bust trending. Kerrane begged us to stop. We didn't listen. I'm listening this year, Kerrane.
Well, to be clear, we is you and
me and Pat,
who weren't here. Yeah.
Me and Pat. Of course, the young guys were in, and we should have listened. All right, we're going to go on to the Chiefs here. Obviously, Rashee Rice's health is going to be a key factor here. He's coming off a catastrophic knee injury in week 4 of last year. It was not just a normal knee injury. It was weird and bad. According to
it's a post-lateral corner, I believe, is what the injury is called.
You know the terminology.
I know the terminology, but it's one, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know a ton about the injury. And 2, it's just a relatively rare injury. So it's not like clean ACL tears where we continue to get updated data that just happens every year to some guys. And it sucks, but it does give us kind of good information on what it looks like to come back from it. We just don't have that kind of data. It does seem like the timeline should be shorter, and the way we're getting hype about Rashee Rice indicates that it is shorter, fingers crossed. But at the same time, with a small sample injury situation, he could be back on the field in week 1 and just have lost the juice. Some guys just blow out their knee and don't come back. So even if he's playing, there is a little bit of, there's a meaningful amount of risk with it. It does seem like the suspension risk has all but been kicked to 2026 right now.
I think so.
Again, also not a lawyer. So another situation where I'm only reading the tea leaves on Twitter and through news clippings and from beat reporters. But the civil case has already been moved to 2026. Does seem like the criminal case will follow suit, or at least they'll attempt to get that to 2026. So as far as the systemic 10,000 foot view risk, I'm pretty low on the idea that the injury is really going to meaningfully impact him, especially in terms of just pure playing time, and extremely low on the idea that he will miss games via suspension this year. So with those caveats being said, Denny, are we just clicking the button? Because he is so good.
I know. I mean, 35% target share, 33% air yard share before the injury. He was dusting Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce out of fantasy relevance, especially Kelce. So if he returns to that instantly in September, then Rice is going to be one of the more important players as far as how you how much risk you're able to tolerate, what kind of team you're building. Is he going to be your wide receiver 1, your wide receiver 2? I guess couldn't be your 3, right? He's not going that
too much anymore. Yeah. He's crept. Yeah. Some people will get him as their wide receiver 3 if they luck out and also have to go receiver.
That'd be cool.
But Yeah, I mean, it'd be awesome. Those days are seemingly over. His ADP
Yeah.
is into the second round. Doesn't mean everyone, especially in home leagues. Like I could see very much the home league drafters being a little more risk averse or just not realizing how insanely awesome and how good he was going to be last year. So I bet he could be your 2 or like 0 RB third wide receiver in home leagues, especially.
We have a short memory, and that might stop us from remembering that like Rashee Rice was gonna win league last year, like very easily. So what do we think, Kyle, just quickly on Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce? Worthy's usage over the final 6 weeks of last season changed pretty dramatically. His average depth of target dropped. His air yards per target dropped significantly in ways that made him a different sort of fantasy producer. He wasn't relying on big plays downfield. He was relying on short area targets and then doing something after the catch, which he can do because he's the fastest guy in the league. Do we think that sort of usage stands up for Worthy? And the presence of Rice, do you think that Worthy becomes more of like a wide receiver 3 for fantasy because of Rice?
Yeah, I mean, Worthy is the kind of player, we've had this conversation with JMO before, where like you, Denny Carter, or the listening audience, if they know anything about me, should expect me to be really excited about Xavier Worthy. Like, I thought he was a really good college profile, a true freshman breakout at a Power 5 school that's like 30% dominator. You controlled a lot of your team's offense in college. When you're 18 years old, that's awesome. He did it again, 30% plus in his second season. And then he didn't quite hit that mark in his final season, but was above 2 yards per route run, which is a fine number. In college, it's just so. But it was some weird offenses, of which he dominated 2 out of the 3 of them. He is an early declare, a first-round pick, and flashes as a rookie. And I think the biggest hurdle for me is just that he flashed as a rookie. He looked good, especially like you said, down the stretch when they changed up his role. They kind of just threw in the towel on him being the deep threat kind of guy. Apparently keeping his feet in bounds and catching footballs deep was too much to ask. Simply too much to ask. But it did work in some sense. Over the second half of the season, I think it's from like week 11 onwards, he was right around 2 yards per route run. He was PFF's number 13 graded receiver. Yeah, week 11 onward. Those are good numbers. Like if you saw that for an entire season, you'd be really impressed. They're good, but they're just not Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice's numbers were like, I mean, you said it, 30+% target shares and air yard shares targeted on like a third of his routes. Those are alpha wide receiver 1 numbers. Those are like, that's what Puka Nacua and Justin Jefferson are doing. And Xavier Worthy's numbers were just good. They were good, but they do not hold a candle to greatness. That is what Rashee Rice was showing us. And that's what makes it so difficult. And the fact that I think only one of them can truly thrive in that underneath role. It'd be one thing if he figured it out as a deep threat. Like, oh, they can both coexist.
Right.
But I do think at this point, he probably still has to figure stuff out as a deep threat, at which point the bet becomes really thin if you are bought into Rashee Rice, which I just am.
Last word on the Chiefs offense here. I don't think they're going to open it up. I don't think that, Mahomes is going to suddenly start chucking it deep like he did in his early NFL career. You would think that would be good for Travis Kelce. I know that folks have adjusted their expectations on Kelce, right? And so he's going as like tight end 6, tight end 7. I don't think that's low enough. I think that he probably should be going at like tight end 10 or tight end 12. I think that people are going to be pretty surprised at how few targets on a weekly basis he's seeing in this offense. He dropped off a cliff last year, and it wasn't injury related. So I think we know what's coming. Are you in that same boat with Kelce as a borderline top 12, or are you more bullish?
No, I mean, I've been in some drafts where I don't take an early tight end, and you see Travis Kelce, and something in your brain's like, well, he was pretty good last year. He's the tight end 6 in points per game. He's going cheaper than he ever has. Like, I won't get an elite tight end, even, drafting him. You're not expecting to get a top 3 or 4 guy, but I can squeeze in that tight end 5 or 6 and not lose the position. He's keeping me afloat. But like, you look at it's a 3-game sample. You look at what he did with Rashee Rice, and it's just quite literally nothing. He had the 3 games with Rashee Rice. He got like 8 passes for 69 yards. And in my mind, Travis Kelce is not a ton of ceiling anymore, but some floor. He's Travis Kelce. Being Travis Kelce gives him some floor. But at some point, it will stop giving him floor. And it looked like that was happening last year. It looked like the Rashee Rice takeover snatched the floor out from under him. And as you said, even when Rashee Rice went down and they had to rely on Travis Kelce, the efficiency metrics showed a player that you do not want to be relying on. If you have the choice to throw to Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy takes the next step, kind of like he was in the second half of last year, you make Travis Kelce more of an ancillary piece of your offense. And when that is the case, if he's still even running all the routes but just can't earn targets, he starts to look like Jake Ferguson or Cade Otton. These guys where the only selling point is really that they just run a lot of routes.
Yeah,
maybe you're out there. That's it. You're out there. And maybe you're out there plus. But like that's what we expect from like Dallas Goedert, right? Like Dallas Goedert's out there, but he just can't earn targets to the level that we want him to because he's not A.J. Brown. He's not Devonta Smith, and the offense loves to run the football. If that's what the floor is, these guys who are just route runners, and we know the ceiling is just not that he's a top 3 tight end. That's probably not in the range for him anymore, given his age and his year-over-year decline. The bet becomes big loss, small win, and I think that you can just make that bet later in drafts, which the cost is the loss doesn't matter that much to you.
That's right. That's right. A guy like Dallas Goedert at ADP seems way more appealing to me than Travis Kelce, just for one. All right, we're going to move on here to the Broncos. Quickly on the receiver front, we have Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims. We now have, what's his name?
Pat Bryant.
Pat Bryant. I always want to say Bryant Pat or something. Okay, Pat Bryant, the rookie who has been compared by Sean Payton to Michael Thomas. We have to remember that. Which of these receivers, if any, Kyle, are you prioritizing in drafts?
Yeah, we talked about this again on Tuesday. Don't mean to reference that show, but it was just a great show.
It was a good conversation. We covered a lot as far as receivers go.
Yeah, Courtland Sutton is fine. I think he's a little more in that vein of like the big hit just isn't going to happen. Like he goes in the same range as like a Travis Hunter, even a Zay Flowers. Those guys could still be superstars. Like Travis Hunter very clearly could be. The question is just how much does he play on offense? But if he comes out and he's a superstar wide receiver, are we going to be shocked? Like, no, very clearly we're not going to be shocked. Even Zay Flowers, who was a good prospect and who's been pretty efficient to very efficient early in his career, like now he has the chance to dominate his team's targets. If that guy comes out and is just a hyper efficient, earns the ball a lot superstar, it's not stunning. Like that's what young players who are good do. You don't have that in the range of outcomes for Courtland Sutton. On the other hand, like he's been pretty good. Like he was really good last year in terms of commanding targets, being efficient, earning targets downfield so he can actually gain fantasy points on those targets. And we have his quarterback coming into his second year in the NFL in which his passing output really spiked over the second half of the season. I do think as far as we were talking about with Travis Kelce, it's a big loss, small win. I don't think the loss is that devastating for Courtland Sutton. I don't see a way in which he just gets usurped by other players on the team that often. Like I like Pat Bryant. Pat Bryant's my favorite click at ADP amongst these guys. Really strong final season with a 30+% dominator, a good breakout threshold, 2.8 yards per route run in his final season in Illinois. These are good numbers, and they've talked him up very well, and he gets good draft capital. But he's ultimately a cheap guy who I think maybe comes on at the end of the season. Marvin Mims is the one that, another guy that kind of like Xavier Worthy, I want to be excited about. Like he's a guy I deserve to be excited about. But man, he does not look like a traditional NFL receiver. So like I'm fine giving guys leeway. Like I've given like Jaden Reed this kind of leeway because there's some stuff he does that's like a little gimmicky that he needs to flesh out what he can do in the NFL to really be a big breakout. But Marvin Mims is so far on the end of gimmicky that it's a little, and it's more than a little concerning for me. It makes it hard to draft him. Last year, he had in the entire season 3 deep catches, 20+ yards downfield, 79th in the NFL. Was he doing anything in the intermediate 10 to 19 yard downfield range? Absolutely not. 2 single catches. And I went back and watched them too. I was watching all of these.
You were grinding Marvin Mims film?
Because I wanted to confirm my priors, and I'll take you through the process. 3 deep catches. They were just like speed deep routes, but they were normal. Like that's what fast guys do is they burn you deep. One of them was even like a real nice head fake to throw the safety off. Beats him deep. I like the deep catches. The 2 intermediate catches are the prior confirming stuff I was looking for. One of them, he's lined up as a running back, runs a wheel route. I'm like, are we really going to like hang our hat on running back routes for our breakout wide receiver? And the second one, I believe, I forget which game, but I'm pretty sure I know it was the playoff game, was a fake punt in which he is lined up as a gunner and he gets a deep.
Oh my God. Oh like, man, that's fluky. You know what? You think you know a guy, and then Kyle comes out and says, I'm grinding Marvin Mims film, and it pays off. And it actually pays off. What's going on here?
Like, to be fair, maybe they continue to line him up as a running back, but they did just go out and sign J.K. Dobbins. They did draft R.J. Harvey. So that stuff, shouldn't go away entirely. He's really good at that stuff, and you don't want to take it away entirely. But you have to assume some of it goes away. Is he good, or was he productive, rather, on 1 to 9 yards downfield? Short stuff, but beyond the line of scrimmage. Nope, 7 entire catches. Like, he had fewer catches beyond the line of scrimmage than Jahan Dotson and Jake Bobo and Luke McCaffrey.
What?
These are like
Jake Bobo?
Yeah, these are not NFL players. Of course, he feasts, absolutely crushes behind the line of scrimmage.
Yes, he does.
So much so that he finishes the year 9th in yards per route run. And I want to be excited about that because guys who are just generally efficient, I want to say guys who are good at football in a limited capacity sometimes can extend that capacity, and that's where breakouts come from. But man, he would have to extend that capacity to a degree that's really hard to see. I liked him as a prospect too. And maybe the one thing you can hang your hat on is as a prospect, he was the opposite of Gadgety. He was like a career 16 or 17 A-dot guy. He was playing inside, outside, and just an outside, or just a burner, just beating teams intermediate and deep. His true freshman season at Oklahoma, he had 4 yards per route run. I didn't look at this because I'm lazy. That's probably the most efficient freshman season in Power 5 of all time that we have route data for.
Let's go with it.
It's close because 5 yards per route run is the single season record set by Trey Harris. 4 as a true freshman might be the true freshman record. And he still goes on to have more efficient seasons. Not a true breakout, but pushed that near 30% dominator in college, doing stuff that he's not doing in the NFL right now. So maybe they can bring some of that stuff he did to college into the NFL. He fleshes out his role. He still maintains his efficiency, and it's a huge hit. But I just think we are so far removed. The only guys who saw a higher percentage of their targets behind the line of scrimmage at wide receiver were Mecole Hardman and Darius Davis, the Chargers' like 4th wide receiver. Like
that's not great.
He's so far in the spectrum of Gadgety that I just don't know if I see it happening this year. This feels like a multi-year progression that it would take. As much as he does kind of look like a bet I want to make.
Right. Just real quick on Marvin Mims, targeted on 28% of his routes. That was really strong, top 10 in the league. So the goal is to get the ball in his hands. That's nice. Is he going to be running? Is he going to be running more than 50% of the routes? I think that it's unlikely. You know, I mean, maybe it's just as likely as it is unlikely. And there's no universe. I don't think where Marvin Mims is running 95% of the routes, and that's
probably
kind of, what you're looking for there. I think the wide receiver 2 for Denver is Evan Ingram. As boring as that sounds, I think Evan Ingram just steps in, runs 8 yards, turns around, and gets the ball from Bo Nix and has a nice season. So that's how I'm sort of playing the Denver passing game. I'm somewhat interested in Cortland Sutton. The way I build my team's not usually like targeting wide receiver in that area. I'm very interested in a guy like Ingram. Ingram's another guy who, like, if you adjust for ADP, looks amazing, I think, compared to where Travis Kelce is going. So that's the Broncos. We're going to take a quick break here and then get to the Chargers, who they're still a team. They're still in the league. Stop saying that they don't exist. They're in LA. They have fans, I'm hearing. So we'll take a break. We'll come right back. Stephen Curry and more champions of the sports world test their golf skills in Lake Tahoe at the American Century. Tune in this weekend for the final rounds at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Kyle, as a golfer, I can't tell you how infuriating it is to watch a high-level athlete from another sport just pick up a golf club and be great at the game, and like Stephen Curry. And I'm not saying Stephen Curry doesn't work at his game. I'm sure he does. But to be that good, to be the greatest shooter of all time, I was told Stephen Curry can't shoot. He can. And then to be a scratch golfer, maybe even better than a scratch golfer, it just seems like cosmically unfair to me. I will watch this event, of course. I love the American Century, but I'm going to be mad the whole time because it's not fair. It's not fair that you're good at 2 sports, like you are elite at 2 sports like that, Stefan.
Do you know who I'm asking? Like, genuinely, I don't know the answer. Like, who's the best like celebrity like golfer in terms of? I know Steph's really like you said, he's like an actually like legitimately good. What would be like functionally like a semi-pro golfer is what you'd call it. I know they have like actual different tours that last down, but like
right.
Yeah,
producer Adams mentions Tony Romo. Romo's freakish. Unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers is really, really good at golf. Every quarterback is good. Let's just.
If you love to golf, I mean, there's obviously like whatever they call it, the match, right? With Allen.
Josh Allen's good. Yeah. It is deeply frustrating for the average human being to watch these elite football players instantly be great at golf. Anyway, onto the Chargers. We're going to be quick with this one here because I don't know if there's much to talk about in the passing game. I mean, it's Ladd McConkey season. We know that. Beyond that, it's more like deep league sort of stuff. My question to get this kicked off is, does the signing of Najee Harris and then the team drafting Omarion Hampton, does that signal kind of the end of the whole experiment last year with like a pass first Justin Herbert based offense for the Chargers? Or do you think they'll try to continue that into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think after their bye, they it was right around the time where they like phased out and then lost to injury Gus Edwards. They had a plus 2% pass rate over expected, which isn't elite, but given the context of the NFL last year, was a pleasant surprise for those of us who drafted guys like Ladd McConkey. I don't. They're probably like a bet to go under that if you just set the line at like 1.5% pass rate over expected. Whatever weird sports book is putting up these lines, you're probably taking under that. You expect them to be balanced. They were run first for those first 4 weeks before they lost Gus, before J.K. Dobbins seemingly started to at least break down or get weighed down by the pressure of having more carries on his back. And of course, they go out and rectify the backfield with Najee Harris and then double down with Omarion Hampton. You have to follow the narrative to some degree and say they are going to run the football more. The one thing that I don't feel too bad about drafting the receivers, or at least drafting Ladd about, is that there's room for Ladd's target share to grow pretty meaningfully. He had a 24% target share last year, which is just inside the top 30, which for a rookie is really good. But for a player of his caliber in terms of his efficiency, he was a top 10 player in yards per route run if you include the playoffs. He's like top 10 in the NFL in receiving yards per game and catches and total catches if you include the playoffs, which he only gets one extra game for. He also missed a game, so it just brings him to a 17-game total anyways. He looked like a superstar in the making. And the one thing we can expect, or at least we think there's a good chance that these young, hyper-efficient players can do, they can grow their role. And it's not like he was doing gimmicky stuff, right? It's just that he didn't come out and dominate 30% targets like only 5 or 6 guys do. But if you were taking next man up, who's going to jump from 24 to 28 to 30% target share? Ladd would be on a short list of like 5 players. He would be like 3rd or 4th on that list of guys who were superstars or at least had superstar flashes early. And you would think their offense wants to run more through them. Thinking about this through the lens of the other wide receivers, as we talk about how much like it's very clear they're going to try and run the ball more, maybe I do need to ease off a little bit of like my Trey Harris love, or like Quentin Johnson doesn't seem like necessarily a bad pick, but maybe I need to ease off, especially if I am projecting Ladd to take that next step.
Right. And it'll be interesting. I'm going to get to the backfield in a second. One thing I'm looking for in training camp with the Chargers is how the tight end depth chart works out.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to see if Oronde Gadsden the second, because he's not the first. I watched the first, who was good. If Gadsden can carve out a real role in the passing game, I see a guy like that as like a slam dunk late round tight end pick, if that's the direction you're going. If you missed out on all the elites and you didn't want to mess around with the middle round guys, and you waited to fill your tight end spot, a guy like Gadsden might jump out depending on how training camp and the preseason go. Omarion Hampton, let's just remind the folks who this is. I know folks are kind of, streaming into fantasy pods, fantasy articles, trying to brush up for the season. So Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, 95th percentile speed score, 91st percentile burst score, crazy good athlete. Last year in North Carolina, he had over 1,200 yards after contact. That was second in the nation only to Ashton Jeanty. He had the 5th most breakaway yards in the nation last season, averaged almost 12 yards after the catch per reception in 2024. This is an explosive guy who gains yards in chunks. I like him over Najee Harris. Call me crazy. Call me nuts. Yeah, this guy. You mean you're talking about this? One of the most explosive backs to come out of the league, come out of college in a while, is going to overtake the least explosive guy in living memory. I think so. So I am maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are going to say Najee is our guy. He's the centerpiece of our entire franchise now, and that's possible because Najee Harris is catnip for these tough football guys. They love him, right? So I could be wrong. But I'm going to draft like I'm right. And if I'm doing that, I am ignoring Najee Harris on the board completely. And I'm taking Hampton at his ADP before it goes up. Because I have a feeling in training camp and in the preseason, we are going to see it maybe not skyrocket, but definitely creep upward.
Yeah, I think about this the same way you do. Is the two selling points for Omarion Hampton is that he's explosive and he can do that on a lot of touches. Like, I love Devon Achane. I don't know. Maybe the evidence seems that he can't, in the NFL at least, translate his explosiveness to a large workload. The pitch for Omarion Hampton is that he can do that. Of course, he's not going to be like a 7 yards per carry player like Achane was, but you think maybe on 250 touches, on 300 touches, he can still be like a 5 to 6 yards per touch or 5 yards per carry kind of player. He's the inverse Najee Harris, where like Najee Harris can handle a big workload. It's just a miserable experience for everyone involved. So to me, part of the reason, at least, that Jaylen Warren never overtook him is the team never trusted Jaylen Warren, and maybe they were right, to get to 250 carries. Because if he could maintain even a semblance of his efficiency on 250 carries or 300 touches, he would absolutely have dusted Najee Harris. But the team never seemed confident in that. The fact that you draft Omarion Hampton tells me you think Omarion Hampton can handle a high workload. So right. I think, like you said, I think early in the season, it'll probably be frustrating. We'll get the coach speak of like, we love Najee, he's our guy or whatever. By week 4 or 5, much like it was with like Gus Edwards last year. Gus Edwards ended up getting hurt. They had almost completely phased him out of the offense for J.K. Dobbins before he got hurt. Like they very clearly saw the writing was on the wall that even if J.K. Dobbins necessarily couldn't handle the entire workload, it was still better to load him up with touches than it was to give Gus Edwards any. And I think that's the situation we're going to get with Omarion Hampton, except Hampton should be able to handle the
workload. Hampton going as RB15 in best ball drafts per producer Adam. Yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't think it's a crazy value, but I think that if things break right, clearly a top 10 guy this season. So Chargers backfield is one to watch. Keep it locked into Rotoworld all summer for more updates. We will have 1,000 blurbs on Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton. That's my promise to you. I'm going to write them all. Kyle's going to call me late at night. Hey, we got another Hampton update, and I'm going to be on it. All right, we're going to move on to the NFC West here, and we're going to begin with the Rams. This time, Kyle, does it count for Kyren Williams maybe losing work to a rookie running back? This time it's Jarquez Hunter, and I've looked into Hunter's profile a little bit. I don't really see it. I'll get into that in a second, but is there any indication that Kyren Williams' role as the RB1 is under threat here?
Clearly not as the RB1, right? But I think maybe the problem with Kyren, in the same way that like it's a problem for Najee, is that Najee needs to get all of the work to be a really valuable fantasy back. Like the problem for the past few years isn't like, frankly, it was hardly even that Najee like wasn't super efficient. If you just combined his work with Jaylen Warren's work, you would have gotten a good running back. But he's not good enough to separate himself from any backup. Whereas Kyren Williams has done that essentially. Like, I mean, the point I'm sort of leading to here is Kyren Williams had 9 carries of 15 yards or more than 15 yards to be clear, last year on 351 attempts. Najee Harris had 11 on nearly 100 fewer attempts. Oof. Like Kyren was probably the least explosive back in the NFL.
Yes.
And the Rams had, because they gave Kyren all their work, the least explosive running game in the NFL. And right after the draft, GM Lesney talks about it. He says, having a committee with different skill sets helps us continue to run the ball the way we want to run it. Like right. They specifically said, like having guys who can do different things, which Corum, the pitch with him is he can do exactly what Kyren does. Kyren goes down. We've got a second Kyren. They made the opposite type of pick in Jarquez Hunter. So I think they've told us very clearly, and they said again later after the draft, they like the home run potential with Jarquez Hunter. It's not that he unseats Kyren. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that's it. If you take a 25% haircut off of what Kyren does, he becomes Najee Harris, and that's not a player you want to draft in the 3rd round.
Yeah, so Kyren Williams going as RB13, disgusting to me. Disgusting. It's not even in the range of outcomes for me. Like I might look at him at RB20, but no. So just real quick on Jarquez Hunter, 90th percentile 40-yard dash speed. It's not bad. Had the 18th most rushing yards in the nation last year on the 33rd most rushing attempts. So efficient, like you said. Yeah, explosive. He's pretty small, 5'9", 205. He had pretty poor after contact rushing numbers. I mean, he didn't do much after contact last year, unlike a guy like Hampton, who we just mentioned a minute ago. I like Hunter as a 0 RB pick late in drafts. I do think that Sean McVay is so into Kyren Williams that it would actually take an injury. It would take missed time for Hunter to have a chance to emerge as the RB1. But like you said, you trim 15%, 20% off the usage of a guy like Kyren Williams, and it gets gross, and it gets gross in a hurry. So just beware of that. All right, we're on to the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to focus mostly on Marvin Harrison. We've talked about several times. Marvin Harrison, who bulked up over the offseason to an extent that almost like freaked out Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray said he thought it was AI when he first saw the pictures of Marvin Harrison. One thing about that, I wish Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray knew each other. You know, it would be cool if.
Why is this the first time he's seeing the pictures? Yeah. You wouldn't think he'd be like, "Oh yeah, we got lunch yesterday. And I said you looked good" or whatever. He was the first time he was seeing it was someone showing him a phone.
This is right. This is what I'm saying. And last year it was the same thing. It was like week 4, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm still trying to get on the same page. He's a rookie." I'm like, "Bro, you guys drafted him 8 months ago. Like, you gotta eventually like shake his hand and say, 'Hi, I'm Kyler.'" And he says, "Hi, I'm Marvin." I don't know how Zoomers do it. Is that how you do it? But
no, Snapchat. We just Snapchat each other from across the room in the same room. But
right, just do it. Just meet each other one time. Harrison kind of got unlucky last year. Only 70% of his targets were deemed catchable. That was in line with guys like Alec Pierce and Calvin Ridley and other.
Yeah, he got unlucky. His quarterback can't throw a deep ball.
Right. You ruined my punchline. I was going to say he's similar to Pierce and Ridley and other receivers who had downfield roles and bad quarterbacks. So there you go. There's my punchline. Boom, roasted Kyler. You don't even know what he did. So I mean, if that rule changes, then I guess I'm going to look silly. But I'm still not interested in Marvin Harrison. And it's not like he has no one to compete. No one competing for targets with him. He has Trey McBride, one of the most like biggest target magnets in all of football, right? So I just don't know what people see. Harrison is still hanging around an ADP that makes me very uncomfortable.
I feel the same way. I want to like him more. And I think there's a very obvious ceiling with the number 5 overall pick, who is an absolute monster in college, like one of the best prospects of the past 10 years. But we have to at some point look at the NFL data and say the team just did not use him in a way that was conducive to scoring fantasy points. And I'm not really sure what would change. And I mean, the thing is changed. They just have to decide. The team just has to say, this was stupid. Let's do it a different way. But I don't want to bet that confidently on the whims of a coaching staff and of a quarterback. Part of it is that, like, just the way Kyler plays football, he just doesn't target that type of Marvin Harrison, a little bit of a contested catch boundary guy, as much as we'd like. He likes checking it down to Trey McBride. So not only need the coaches to change like his route tree and maybe move him in the slot more, stuff like that. But if that doesn't happen, you could also say maybe Kyler changes. Kyler isn't changing, man. Nothing's changing here. But fantasy drafters taking him as a wide receiver 15 are pretty confident that stuff is changing. And I think they're just more confident than I am.
Yeah, that seems. And until we get word that it is going to change, that Marvin Harrison's going to see way more easy looks, intermediate, short area looks, which is really not his game in the first place, then I'm out. So anyway, Marvin Harrison's ADP will be interesting throughout the summer. We're going to take a quick break and then get to the 49ers and the Seahawks. Tune in to the Tour de France Daily Recap at 7 p.m. Eastern on the NBC Sports Now channel, and enjoy extended highlights and stage previews with special episodes of Beyond the Podium. The NBC Sports Now channel is available on Peacock, Samsung TV, the Roku channel, and more. Visit NBCSports.com for more details. All right, we're going to get into the Niners here. We have mentioned on previous podcasts that the 49ers profile as like a classic regression team. And by that, I actually mean regression in a good way, regression in a positive way. And folks don't like positive regression as a term, but I'm going to use it because that's how I understand it. They ran real cold on touchdowns last year. They moved the ball at a pretty good clip. They were still kind of sort of an EPA machine. which Kyle Shanahan's offenses always are. Success rate overall was fine, not elite, but fine. So I do think that all of these guys, all of these 49ers, including Purdy, are going to be at least slightly underdrafted. But I wanted to talk about the wide receiver situation. So Deebo Samuel dealt to Washington. He's their problem now. Brandon Aiyuk recovering from a torn ACL. Jauan Jennings maybe profiles as the wide receiver one. How are you playing the San Francisco receiver situation, Kyle?
I think you've written about Jauan this offseason, at least as part of an article, and I'm just going to echo some points that you've made, or at least similar points. Last year, he was 16th in PFF receiving grade, 14th in yards per route run, targeted on 26% of his routes. Wow. Open Score, ESPN's player tracking data, ranked him wide receiver 24. And this is while the entire season he wasn't operating in that number one wide receiver role. Obviously, had Aiyuk for 8 or 9 weeks. Debo's there for most of the entire season. He obviously was kind of a shell of his former self, but not the entire season. He was operating in the Jauan Jennings role that we eventually came to know and love. Like, his numbers should be even better than those if he just is the team's wide receiver one from week one, which that's how ADP has it. And I think that's logically what's going to happen. So I think earlier I've talked about Ricky Pearsall. I'm like, he's pretty terrible in all the metrics, but we should cut him some slack. And I think I'm just going Jauan. The numbers are too good to not go Jauan.
They are shockingly good. I at the end of last season, I hadn't really caught up with how efficient he was being. I just thought of him as a Kyle Shanahan creation. He wasn't. I mean, he was genuinely a really good both real life producer and of course fantasy producer. I guess Pearsall could maybe get there just on volume while Aiyuk is out. I guess the real beneficiary here is probably George Kittle, right? I mean,
yes, yeah.
You know, anytime. So in the past, we had Deebo, Aiyuk, Kittle, right? And if any one of those guys was out, just for DFS purposes, you were in on one of the other guys. Like, and because the targets, it was always a condensed target tree, right? You take one guy out, those targets are going to go to the other two guys, sometimes only one guy. So I think it makes Kittle a guy that, you know, you definitely want to target and whose ADP is not outrageous at the moment. And I don't think it will be, because I'm not sure this stuff is being incorporated into how people value him. Is Kittle someone that you end up with, just say in best ball drafts?
Yeah, I think the way it's being drafted right now is like somewhat of a like linear path between tight end 1 and tight end 12, where like we've got these gaps between Trey McBride and Brock Bowers, and Trey McBride and George Kittle, and Kittle and the next guy, which is like Laporta or then TJ Hawkinson. Whereas I think there should be a chasm after George Kittle. Like, if you do not get George Kittle, you are not taking a tight end for like 6 or 7 rounds. Because they're in between that, like TJ Hawkinson, the next guy, or Sam Laporta, who's like career 1.5 yards per route run, good but not great player. The difference between that guy and Dallas Goedert just is not that much. You know, it's like 10 or 15%. The difference between Kittle and Sam Laporta, it's like 30%. Like, the gap should be way wider. So Kittle's someone where I don't even know if he's a massive target, but thinking about the difference between Kittle and the next group of tight ends kind of shapes the way I play early tight end, which is that I like them this year.
Brandon Aiyuk expected to be put on the PUP list to start the season. That means he will miss at least 4 weeks. I think when the reality that he'll miss a month or more kind of dawns on everybody, 100%. I think we will see him fall.
We'll plummet.
You know, at what point is he a value? It's hard to say at the moment, but something to monitor. We, of course, will keep you up to date on Rotoworld throughout the off season, throughout the summer, training camp, all that good stuff. The Seahawks are our final team of the NFC West and our final team of the day. I want to focus on the backfield first. Kyle, is Ken Walker a bounce back candidate as the centerpiece of this Clint Kubiak machine? I'm kidding, of course, but Clint Kubiak. Hey, look, Clint Kubiak called 2 good games last year for the Saints.
They were so good. Those are 2 of the craziest games ever.
Yeah, and then, I talked about this with Rotopat a lot. Like, the Kubiak's using motion and play action at league high rates. He's doing all the nerdy spreadsheet stuff that works, and then he stops, and then he just stops, and the offense goes in the tank. So very frustrating. Hopefully he gets back to that this year in Seattle. I think you're in on Ken Walker at ADP. I still feel like he's a guy whose injury history is just a nightmare.
Yeah, Kubiak, I think maybe at best, in a sort of complimentary way, reminds me of like Arthur Smith, where like you expect the ground game to be good, but to the point where like that's enough. That's enough. Way too much. But like you look at like the Ryan Tannehill days, where I think Arthur Smith was the OC and it was still Vrabel at the time. Was like Ryan Tannehill was the most efficient quarterback in the NFL, but because his stuff was pretty curated, because the team was like, oh, let's jam down the throats of Derrick Henry. And then A.J. Brown is left one-on-one, and he is open. And Tannehill throws for like 30-something touchdowns. I don't think this will be that good, right? But I do think the idea that this staff, this Clint Kubiak offense, wants to use the run to set up efficient passing is probably how they view the game of football. Last year, Kubiak had a minus 5% pass rate over expected. In the games Derek Carr started, it was minus 8%. And we saw last year in Seattle, Ken Walker, when healthy, like you said, health is a caveat that we have to make for Ken Walker, saw 76% of the team's running back carries, the 7th highest rate in the NFL. Like he was as dominant in terms of the carries as almost any other back but 6. If you're telling me we have a run first, but maybe efficient offense, at least efficient running game in Seattle, it's kind of the perfect setup for Ken Walker outside of the slight meaningful, frankly, quarterback risk that like Sam Darnold turns back into a pumpkin, and the offensive line shouldn't be very good. But last year, terrible quarterback play, not great offensive line for the Saints. They were 10th in EPA per rush attempt. They also didn't like Kamara was not particularly efficient in terms of the fancy metrics, but we still got a top 10, just barely top 10 efficiency offense on the ground. I think, like we talked about with Arthur Smith, Kubiak can do some things well. He just leans on them almost certainly too much. That's perfect for Ken Walker. Great.
Remember when Ken Walker was like leading the league in running back targets? That was glorious, man.
Crazy times. We won't see that again. But
I was like, oh, okay. So like this is like my best pick ever. Like Ken Walker is gonna like run away with the RB1 title. Charbonnet to me strikes me as a guy who maybe you pick up as a stash, but you're definitely in 12-team leagues. You're not picking him up and saying, well, I can maybe flex this guy.
Wait till the guy who needs to cut Charbonnet for a streaming tight end cuts Zach Charbonnet.
That's right. Yeah, that's actually probably the way to approach it. Look, the Seahawks did not sign Sam Darnold to sling the ball around, right? They signed Sam Darnold to manage the game, to make throws when they needed it. He does have a lot of arm talent per the evaluators. He is a good thrower of the football. He tends to collapse, I don't know, mentally, psychologically in crucial situations, as we saw last year in the final 2 weeks. But he's coming off a pretty good season. So if he can manage this offense in a way that keeps the ball going, keeps the first downs coming, the sticks moving, whatever you want to say, then I think a guy like Ken Walker can benefit tremendously from that setup. I'm in on Ken Walker at ADP. I want to real quick, we're going to close the show with a quick discussion of Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith and Jigba. We got a report last month that really was concerning to me as far as JSN's usage, because it said, hey, Cooper Kupp's tearing up minicamp from the slot. It looks like he's the guy from the slot. That's JSN's whole thing. Like that's why we liked him last year, was he's pretty good from the slot / sometimes great from the slot. And I'm not going to bore folks with the metrics. I would never do that. You know that. But from the boundary, JSN is at best league average, sometimes, depending on which measure you're looking at, sometimes worse. So if he's pushed out to the boundary in 2025, I'm very concerned about JSN, and I'm probably a little more bullish on Cooper Kupp. Is that, am I talking nonsense? Am I an elder millennial who has gone too far here?
Yeah, the thing that worries me with Kupp, right, is that they play him in the slot and they're like, this is kind of working. This is sort of working, but let's try JSN in the slot. And like, this is way better. This is immediately way better. It's another probably small win. Like, I think even Kupp in the slot, when you look at his slot data last year, was good, but it wasn't Cooper Kupp anymore, very obviously. So like, It's a small win, but if they move him outside, it's done. He's just completely dusted. Whereas at least with JSN, it's a big win. If this offense works and he plays in the slot, he was absolutely dominant down the stretch last year as a slot receiver, like a complete catch merchant. And he was also explosive and efficient on his catches. So there's at least a big win potential. But I think the fact that if they move JSN outside, it's also maybe over for him. Maybe he can develop that skill set, right? He's young, he's athletic, good prospect. maybe he can develop that skill set. But the fact that that is so clearly in the range of outcomes, if they move him outside and he's not good, like that can just happen quite easily on a coach's whim. It doesn't feel like the most fun wide receiver currently.
No. Whenever I get to him in a draft, in a best ball draft, I'm not excited. I'm just not. That wasn't the case last summer. The Kupp signing makes no sense, and it's actually infuriating because the only reason that he signed with Seattle is to get back at the Rams. He wants to play against his former mates twice a season. Like that's blatantly obvious. Okay, like you're not fooling anyone. The Seahawks are a terrible fit for Cooper Kupp, and vice versa. You just want to play the Rams twice, right? Why didn't you go to the Cardinals? They could have used you.
Brandon Aiyuk, ACL tear, Devo gone. That would have worked so well.
Kyle Shanahan could make Cooper Kupp into Jerry Rice. Give me a break.
Yeah.
So this Seattle fit is awful. I guess if Kupp stays healthy, I'm saying that it's not good for JSN. So we'll see how that unfolds in training camp. Folks, keep it locked in the Rotoworld for throughout the summer, but especially when training camp starts. We're going to have all your updates. We're going to update you on the Rotoworld Football Show. We will be joined by the vacationing Rotopat next Tuesday. The jet-setting Rotopat is the term I was looking for. Next Tuesday for more talk. We're going to touch on some newsy items that we weren't able to get to this week and whatever happens over the weekend. For Kyle, I'm Denny. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you on Tuesday.